Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Weatherman, and my intention with these videos is to give people a basic understanding in SQL, um, anywhere from just running just basic select statements, update statements, insert statements, and I'm going to try to go all the way through, make several different tutorials on creating stored procs, creating functions, and even get into creating and building SSIS packages that will import data from a flat file into a database. So a little bit about me. I live in Central Florida and work for one of the largest corporations, not only in Florida, but even worldwide, as a software developer. We've written well over 70 apps that range in technologies from classic ASP, ASP.NET, MVC, and more recently we've been developing an AngularJS. The database we use is a SQL Server database where we access through Management Studio. We have well over 200 SSIS packages that bring in data from flat file sources externally as well as internally and manipulate that data and store it in the tables in our database. We also, in those, we use logging to log files that came in, file names, file paths, and all that, and we'll try to get through all that eventually. Not in this video, but eventually down the road. Without further ado, I've just opened up my local copy of the AdventureWorks database. It's got several different tables in it to include all the human resource stuff, the person stuff, all the way, just from downloading AdventureWorks. So I guess the first three things anybody needs to know about working with a database is how to select information from a table, how to insert information into a table, and how to update information in a table. So in order to do that, we will just open up a general query. And a select statement uses the select keyword. You can either specify individual columns from a table, or you can use wildcards. So the wildcard for select all columns is an asterisk or star. Then you tell it which table you want to select from. So let's just use we'll use the person address table. So this is going to select every single row from the person.address table. Okay, so this is all the information that we get from that. Now, as you can see, there's over 19,000 rows here, so you may want to narrow that list down. So in order to do that, you use what's called a where clause. Then you specify a column name. So let's just use the column city. Set it equal to something. And this is in the front-end development community, this would be considered a string. In SQL, it's called a varchar or an invarchar. So see that you've got this actually set as an invarchar. The difference between these data types, invarchar and varchar, is invarchar will accept foreign characters. So city will encapsulate it in single quotes since it's a string or a varchar value. And let's just use that first city right there, Bothell. Okay, so when we run this will only return lines with the city of Bothell. So, I mean, we've got several different cities in there. Did I misspell that? Oh yeah, 2 L's. There we go. So now that's down to 26 rows. So that is a simple select statement. You'll notice some similarities between a table and an Excel sheet. A table is nothing but a collection of data that's assembled in rows and columns. So each one of these are considered a column, or sometimes they're called a field. And then each one of these is a row. Right, so whenever we did our select statement, we selected from a table where a column equals a certain value. We could also do it where state or province ID looks like it's going to be an integer. Yep, it's an integer value. So we can say where state province ID equals 79. So integers don't get encapsulated in single quotes. They just get typed out as is. So that's going to bring back everything with this state province ID of 79, which there might be more values in 26. There might be more cities besides Bothell in this state. Which there are. There's 2,600 rows. So you can see there's several different cities that have that state ID. Okay, another powerful tool in a selection statement is called an in clause, where we can say where a column value is in a certain range. So let's use our city again. You say city in, and you do open and close parens. And then let's do 2 cities. So since these are string values again, these are going to be encapsulated in single quotes. And we separate each one of those fields by a comma. So let's use our first city, which was Bothell, 2 L's this time. And let's use Bellevue. So that should bring back all rows that have both Bellevue and Bothell as a city. Which we got 67 rows this time. And there they are. So we got Bothell and Bellevue in the cities. Now most of the time, whenever you return a list, especially in an app, you're going to order it. So an order clause will order it by a certain column value in whatever order you specify. So we can say order by. If you want to use city, that will order it alphabetically by the city name, which in this case would be Bothell or Bellevue, so Bellevue values will come up first. So now we have all of our Bellevue cities first, and then Bothell follows after that. Now you can also order it by 2 different parameters, 2 different fields. So let's say we'll order it by city and the date that it was modified with this modified date. Modified date. Okay, so we still get all of our Bellevue cities first, but you'll notice now that the dates, they've reordered this list so that it goes from beginning date to the most recent date. So this was modified on January 30th, 2002, December 26th of 2002, 27th of 2002. Here we get into 2030, so you can see how this list is ordered. And then we're going to do that all for the city Bellevue. It'll put them in order. Then once we get to Bothell, it starts it over again. So now we're back to January 2002, 2003, and so on and so forth. you can also use something called a descending clause, which is DSC. Right, now this will do it in reverse order. It will order still by city alphabetically first, but it's going to switch the dates. So for Bellevue, this date right here, which is 9/1/2006, is going to be listed first. So there it is. Right, but it's still ordering everything in alphabetical order from the city. Now you can also reverse city or a string value by going descending. And this will put everything Bothell first with a modified date in descending order as well. So now we have all of our Bothell cities, and then Bellevue. And Bothell going from 2008, 2007, 2006 on down the list. Alright, so now let's go over a join. The most common is going to be just a inner join. And to do this, we're going to use something called an alias. This will allow you to join two tables together. The alias will define which tables you want. And then you can use that alias with your columns, because you might not want all columns from both tables. You might only want certain columns from each table. So you would use that alias to define columns from, the first table and columns from the second table. So let's look at the person address type table. Okay, that's not doing me much good. How about the state province table? Or is there a state province table? It looks like there is. Oh, there it is, person, state, province. There we go. So we got a state province ID and a state province ID in this table. So we're going to join on this ID to bring back values from the state table and marry that up to a person table. So first off, let's go over alias. That's going to be our ultimate goal, is to join these two tables. But first we'll do an alias. So we'll call person address PA. Now from person address, from this table, these spatial locations and row GUID IDs aren't really doing us much good. So let's just select our individual columns that we want. So now we'll start with the PA alias, period, and then see how IntelliSense brings you all the different columns that are available in PA. So you got address ID, address line, line 2, city, so on and so forth. So let's just pick out the address. Then we'll do PA dot city. PA dot postal code. And then PA dot modified date. Alright, so now this, using that alias, when we execute this, this just brings back the columns that we specifically called out. So an inner join uses a keyword of inner join. And then you can call out the table that you want to join to, which in our case what we decided was person, state, province. State, province, and then we're going to give this an alias of, and you can also use the alias keyword, which is as. We'll do PSP for person, state, province. Okay, now you got to tell SQL what you're going to join on, which columns you're going to join on. So let's state. Oops, PA.state. So that you can see how this works. We'll put that ID in there. Okay, so now we got our ID column. So now we're going to join on PA.state province ID equals PSP, and it's going to be the PSP state province ID as well. So this is basically going to say, let's see now now that we've completed that inner join statement, all our errors go away, the little red squiggly lines. Now right now this is still only going to bring columns from the P8 alias table, which is person address. But when we run this, it shouldn't give you any errors. So now we can start pulling values back from the PSP table. So from here, let's go PSP dot and see what values we have available. So let's see let's pull back the name, which should be the state's name. Let's go. How about a state province code? We'll see what that value is. Alright, so now we should actually get the state's name and the province code from the state table. Okay, so the code looks like it's going to be the 2-character state identifier. So now we can see, instead of having a number, an ID number to go by for what state it is, we now have an address with a state, a city, a postal code, like a complete address, like you would use for a mailing address. And we still ordered it by our values in the person address table. Now, one thing to note is, since there's no city column or modified date column, actually there's a modified date in state province, so I'm actually surprised that didn't throw an error, because a lot of times if you have the same 2 columns in the same places, then it's going to ask you to point out which ones it's supposed to belong to. I guess SQL or Management Studio is smart enough to figure that out. Alright, so now we have everything fully qualified, and it's also a good practice, especially from my experience being part of the support team where I work. A lot of times I'm not part of the initial development, and some of these queries can get really, really long and hairy. When you use multiple tables, always, whether it's obvious to you or not, because it might not be obvious to the guy that's following up behind you, use your alias on every column and in all your where and order by clauses. That way, somebody that doesn't have any idea about this query or what you're doing with it, and if it's a really long query with a lot of different tables and a lot of different sources, they'll be able to look at this alias and be able to tell exactly which table those columns came from. So it's still the same value. So now we can actually, if we don't want this ID anymore, we can remove this and run it. And now we've got, and we can reorder this as well. So usually you have a city and a state right after, or the state right after the city. So if you want to look at it in more of a normalized address order, we can move those around. So now we've got address, the city, the state, state's code, and the postal code. Alright, so that is pretty much a select statement with an inner join. And you can interjoin multiple tables together. Depending on what you have IDs for. Now that's an inner join. So what does an inner join mean? An inner join means that the value has to be present in both tables. So this is the first table that we're starting with. So the ID field that we were joining on was the state province ID, which was 79. So this is only going to bring back records that match in both tables on 79. So if we look at this table individually, probably only going to be one road because there's only one state, Washington. There we go. But if there was no Washington state in this table, there was no ID 79, this would bring back 0 records. So let's let's do that. Actually, I don't think I can do that. But anyway, so yeah, just pretend that you had, in the state province table, you had a state ID of, say, 160. If we look at this table, oh, there is a, no. 181. So let's say that there's a state province ID of 182 in here, in this table, the PA table. Since there's no 182 ID here, then it would bring back 0 records. Because that value has to be present in both tables. Now there is such a thing called a left join. Where it would bring back everything associated with your where clause from the first table, and where it didn't match a value in the second table, it would be a null value. So let's actually, we can do this with an AND clause, so let's do this. And let's go PSP dot name equals XXX. So there shouldn't be any names in there with XXX. So with this, we're saying where state ID equals state ID, and the name is also equal to XXX. So this should bring back 0 rows, which it does. So now if we change this to a left join, it should still bring back all of our rows from the address table where the city is in those 2 values, and it'll order everything. But for the values that we're getting from the PSP table, these 2 values, they should return null values because there's no such name as XXX, which it does. So now we get all of our 67 rows from our first table. And when we're doing the left join, if it meets the criteria that they're in there, then it would fill these in. And if it doesn't, then you still get the 67 rows that are in Bothell and Bellevue, but you're just not getting any state information to go along with it. So if we take this out, by the way, a double dash is a comment in SQL. So SQL will ignore that line of code right now. So now we get it back. and it's still the same 67 rows. Alright, that pretty much covers a basic select statement. So what we went over was selecting from one table. We selected from one table where certain fields were equal to certain values. We ordered that table by columns or fields in that table. And then we also went over an inner join and a left join, which those are your two probably your most common joins. There's others out there like cross joins, full joins, but probably your two most common that you're going to run into are inners and lefts. And then we went over showing what the difference between the inner and the left join is. So I hope this helps, and stay tuned for the next video where we'll go over inserting and updating statements or updating tables. Thanks a lot. Bye.